Is everybody feeling positive? Well, the teleconnections are sure feeling that way. When it's all positive, that means a lot of fast flow, northwest component dominating the pattern across the central U.S. and Canada. Now with the Madden-Julian oscillation in phase 1, this is all a ripe situation for a cold air outbreak. But the Canadian Arctic Air Factory just ain't cutting it. After the excesses of early February, it's lost steam. As you can see, just not much cold air to be found. We do see some in the eastern Arctic, but it's not a favorable position to advect it anywhere except for eastern Canada and the Northeast. So that makes some of us wonder whether winter is over. And it is going to be March this weekend. Spring and the equinox are close at hand. Well, I gotta say that today is one of the calmest days we've seen probably since September. A weak frontal system moving into Texas and Oklahoma. Behind it, temperatures only in the 50s and above freezing in North Dakota, so not much oomph to that front. Warm front through the upper Ohio River Valley extending into Virginia. Temperatures south of that front quite warm into the 70s in the Carolinas, but up north, stagnant 30s and 40s. The visible satellite imagery today shows a lot of frozen terrain up in Canada and New England. And we mentioned back on Monday, Caribou maxed out their frost depth gauge. They were sitting at about, 36 inches of frost. Lots of frozen ground up there. And you can see that still there is cold air advection in place across New England, but another frontal system is on the way. Lots of fair weather across the southeastern U.S., and it looks like the sea breeze is trying to get started right there in southern Florida. Very warm today, temperatures in the 70s all the way up into Kentucky, the Carolinas. Hard to believe that we were looking at blizzard conditions just a week or two ago. A few 80s popping up in north central Florida, northwest of Orlando, and that brings to mind, with things warming up, we're only about 5 or 6 months away from another hurricane season. So we're going to have to start watching those seasonal hurricane outlooks, which should be coming out in another month. Across the southern plains, fair skies, some fog and stratus burning off out there in deep east Texas and Louisiana. Some cold air advection approaching from the north, just off the frame. We'll look at that briefly. Temperatures across the southern plains ranged from 60s in the panhandles, Kansas, Missouri, to the 70s and 80s in Texas, and we pick up 80s in south and southwest Texas. A bit of destabilization behind that cold front. That's that air mass modifying over the relatively warm ground. The front located down in this area, this is all northerly flow. And we're developing a little bit of towering cumulus there. Those are shallow convective elements, maybe only up to about 10 or 12,000 feet, but enough to produce some virga and rain showers. In the southwestern U.S., cool. In the Rockies, we're looking at 30s and 40s there, with 40s out on the high plains. 40s and 50s for Utah, and as we go south, it gets much warmer. The hot weather continues in the southwest deserts up to the low 90s from Yuma to the Salton Sea and Palm Springs. 89 for this afternoon at Phoenix. In the California interior, low to mid 70s in the San Joaquin Valley, 79 at Los Angeles, 74 at San Diego. Wind advisory late tonight until tomorrow afternoon for the coastal ranges from about Los Angeles to east of San Diego. East winds 20 to 30 miles an hour, gusting to 55. And in the northwestern U.S., there's trouble offshore. You can see those cold air advection cumulus elements to the west of the system and further to the east ahead of the system, deep southerly flow. So changes are on the way for much of the West Coast region. It was warm today. We were looking at widespread 60s across the Willamette Valley, 67 at Roseburg, 59 at Seattle and Olympia. In the interior, a mix of 40s and 50s, with 49 at Spokane, 54 at Boise, and 59 at Pendleton. A little bit of downslope flow through that region. Then we head out west and we see that Pacific frontal system appearing as an open trough. Then heading up into Alaska, we've got a 974 millibar low in the Gulf of Alaska, northerly flow across the main part of Alaska itself. Most of the problems are in southeastern Alaska, widespread gale warnings in the Panhandle and the Gulf of Alaska around Ketchikan, located down here. A high wind warning was in effect earlier today. Southeast winds gusting to 60 miles an hour. Winter weather advisory around Haines until 9 p.m. this evening. Could be up to 5 inches of snow there. Skagway, a little further northeast, under a winter storm warning all afternoon and evening. And as we head into Canada, a cold polar high, but you can see the pressure's back in that high, only 1022 millibars. And we need to see 1040s and 1050s to really give that force that we need to drive it into the U.S. So this is just not really doing much for us. Mild across western Canada, 40s and even 50s across the province. We've got precipitation warnings, rainfall warnings out there around Prince Rupert. Snowfall warnings across northeastern Alberta into north central Saskatchewan. And problems out in Newfoundland with this big wrapped up 982 millibar low. All of eastern Newfoundland, including St. John's, under rainfall warnings. Localized flooding due to frozen ground, just not anywhere for that rain to go. So it spreads out horizontally into parking lots, into rivers, and we get that flooding going on. Now let's take a look at the atmospheric rivers, because this is what we want to focus on going into next week. We do have a weak one across the Ohio River Valley this afternoon. That's going to rapidly move eastward overnight and into tomorrow. Then things start recharging for early next week. Here's the start of it on Sunday, and continues gaining strength overnight. Low-level jet in place across the Interstate 35 corridor for Monday, and shifts eastward into the deep south for early Tuesday. And this is where we're looking at the potential for severe weather, especially as we get into the peak convective period around 0Z to 06Z. So a lot of concerns from the Ohio River Valley into western Tennessee and into Mississippi. Now, as far as the potential for severe weather, well, that's 6 days out. We do not want to try to analyze those kinds of details 6 hours out. That is bad science, and there's probably some channels out there doing that. However, it's probably safe to look at the general characteristics and just kind of get a ballpark idea of what we might see, because we can make some inferences about what might be happening on Tuesday. So we go forward. There's the low-level jet setting up on Monday and shifting eastward and regenerating early on Tuesday. So this is going to be about noon on Tuesday, and I do see southwesterly flow 40 to 50 knots, and that is going to definitely curve the hodographs. So I am going to be looking for high amounts of SRH. The question is whether we're going to have that instability. Well, we can go to Pivotal Weather and take a quick look at that. Well, to be honest, the Cape is not all that great. The lapse rate's conditionally unstable. Let's take a look a little bit further south. Maybe we're too far north into the cold air, and we see the Capes are really not all that great. So, a lot could change between now and then. We're just going to have to reevaluate over the weekend and for the Monday episode of Forecast Lab. And we do have to remember we're going to see changes on those models between now and Tuesday. Timing errors, amplitude errors, positioning errors, all that stuff. Even the thermal fields may paint a different picture as Tuesday approaches, so we can't completely rule out severe weather. Anyway, this is a classic P&A pattern. We've got that ridging over western Canada, a little bit of troughing out there, long wave troughing in the Gulf, and going forward into the remainder of the week, lots of ridging in western Canada, cutoff low moving into California. So that's what we're going to be watching. That swings inland, and another low drops into California for late in the weekend. And this is about the point we're going to be seeing that wave come through the deep south. Doesn't really look like a major trough moving into the area. Because of that, that is going to keep the mid-level temperatures a little bit on the warm side. See that little thermal ridge? That's one reason the instability is not quite as high as we would expect. But again, if there's amplification of this pattern, stronger cold advection in the mid-levels, that could create a different kind of situation. Rex block in the Pacific, so that indicates some stagnation of the weather patterns. And as we get into late in the period, late next week, looks like much of the same Hudson Bay low northwesterly flow into the Great Lakes and Northeast. So this is just kind of a continuation of what we've been seeing. But the Pacific storm track does start opening up, and we could see some periods of wet weather in the western half of the country. And let's look at the short term with the Q vectors and the 500 millibar height field. We see some lift moving through New Mexico. We didn't see much in the way of clouds, and that's because it's a rather dry air mass there right now, but there is some lift going on, enough to generate some high winds and blowing dust out there in the southern deserts. There's that ridging on the west coast. Let's go into the overnight hours and into tomorrow. This thing kind of hunkers down across Arizona. A little bit of lift continuing out there in southeastern Arizona. A new round of lift starts approaching the California coast. Forgot to mention this one. Let me back that up. Yeah, some fast-moving upper energy heading into the eastern U.S. Strong omega block in the western U.S. for Thursday. That's kind of a small-scale weather pattern, but it's enough to kind of keep things locked up briefly and impede the progress of that cutoff low into California. But eventually it breaks through Saturday. All that upper-level lift moves into the Great Basin area. Then we go into Sunday and Monday. You can follow along for your favorite area. Large trough moving into the western U.S., bringing lift into Texas for Wednesday and Thursday. And I wanted to go back to Tuesday because that was the suspected severe weather day. Doesn't look like the upper-level patterns are in phase with the surface dynamics. The stronger upper-level lift hitting the southeastern U.S. for Wednesday and Thursday. So I'm going to check those surface charts momentarily and see what's going on. Very strong forcing in Georgia, Alabama for early Thursday. So maybe this is going to be more of a Wednesday type event. Anyway, yeah, I did analyze the charts, but I was not looking at those details. I was just basically throwing the fronts on, trying to get this out the door. This is the picture for this afternoon. There's that front that we showed you, kind of an anti-front setup. A lot of the clouds and precip back behind that cold front. We're going to be seeing mixed precip overnight in New York, snow in the Adirondacks and Vermont, but down in Pennsylvania, southward, it should remain in the form of rain. A lot of mixed precip across the Great Lakes, some of it freezing rain back into the UP of Michigan, but more of a rain-snow mix further south around Detroit and Lansing. We bring this forward into the day Thursday. There's 6 a.m. You can see that precip changing over to rain from the New York Thruway south into Pennsylvania. Snow advances into Maine, changing over to all rain across much of New York and New England as we go into the day. Cooler in the Great Lakes. Lake effect snows within that cold advection zone in northern Michigan. Rain showers further south. We're going to be seeing 60s from Alabama and Texas for highs, 40s and 50s in the Midwest. You can see specks of rain there. So the model not going for a very cold column. Another warm day in the East Coast region, 70s from Chesapeake Bay down to the Carolinas. In the southwestern U.S., cooler air, Still lots of 80s. Bakersfield expecting to reach 81 tomorrow. There could be some blowing dust in southeastern Arizona with these strong pressure gradients. Seattle, they're going to be seeing 60s tomorrow. Let's go into Friday and move things along. Another clipper working into the Great Lakes area, into Lake Superior and Michigan. Heavy, dynamically forced snow early on Friday as that moves to the southeast. And as we go into later on Friday, that snow will be moving into upstate New York just in time for the evening commute, then into New England after dark. Could see mixed phase precipitation overnight across New York south into Pennsylvania, and the Great Lakes start quieting down for Friday night. And the Great Plains warming right back up for Saturday as that southerly flow gets reestablished. As we go into Sunday, we see a major Pacific weather system starting to move inland. There it is in California. We could see winter weather in the Sierras. Looks like the snow levels will lower to about 5,000 feet, so probably issues in the Sierras early Sunday into Sunday night. I would expect winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories. Warm in Texas, downslope flow, that means 70s and 80s. Then we go into Monday. This is when that low-level jet gets established right on top of that warm front. So really not too much for Monday. Things start strengthening for Tuesday. So here's Tuesday night. Looks like some showers and storms developing, but again, mid-level warmth could be an issue. And this is where I'm thinking maybe Wednesday could bring that cooling, that destabilization. So this may be our severe weather day. Not sure how the timing is going to work out, but yeah, there's Wednesday front pushing through late on Wednesday into Thursday and moving into the northeast coast region. Another push of cold air into the Rockies and southern plains late in the week. And a strong Alberta clipper moving into the Midwest and Great Lakes for late in the week. In closing, I want to thank our Patreon supporters, people like Patrick Frank, Remington Gray, Larkin Kinsella, Gary Penn, Philip Slack, James Taylor. Thank you very much for that support, for helping to keep this program going. And if we do pick up a significant amount of support, I'll probably be trying to do these 5 days a week. But right now, we're just not there yet. All right, hope you have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you back here on Friday for the weekend edition of the show. Take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.